Hello, friends. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Elliot Parker, and whether you're a writer, a reader, or just a lover of words, I invite you to stop what you're doing and join me for a page break. I'm so excited to have author and literary consultant Amy Shannon with us today on the program. We're going to talk about literary consulting and literary consultants. And if you're a beginning writer or a novice writer, or you're a writer who maybe is in your middle of your career, or the middle of your writing career, or maybe you're an advanced writer with several works published, what is literary consulting, and might you as a writer need a literary consultant? We're going to talk about that with Amy in just a minute. But I wanted to remind you that if you're new to the channel, welcome. We profile books. We talk about publishing industry news with the people and the writers and the experts and the publishers and the editors and the agents and everybody that's doing all the work, both in front of the bookstore shelf and behind the bookstore shelf. So welcome to the channel if this is your first time. If this is your first time joining us, please go over here and click the subscribe button and make this a regular part of your YouTube viewing experience. If you're watching this on Instagram, please be sure that you like the episode over here to the left, and be sure that you leave a comment in the comments field on Instagram. You can also leave comments in the comments fields on YouTube as well. And if you have any specific questions for Amy as we are doing this interview, and even after the interview, we'll be sure to forward those questions on to her so that we can get a response. But we're glad to have you on the channel. We've been away for a few weeks because we've been setting up our schedule for the rest of the spring and early summer. I'm so delighted to have the guests that we have coming on, both Amy today and in the future. We've got some really great agents and publishers that are going to join us. We've got some great book reviews that we're going to talk about as well. We're also going to go to some book festivals this spring and summer and visit some independent bookstores this spring and summer as well. So a lot of coming up on the channel in the weeks and months ahead. So we hope you'll subscribe and stay a part of that. And that's one of the reasons we've been away for a few weeks. It takes a while to get all that scheduled and to get all that programmed, to get permissions and all of that, to just show up and start filming somewhere. So we appreciate your patience and appreciate you sticking around. A couple folks have reached out to me and said, hey, what's happened to the channel? Has it gone dormant? Are you doing any more episodes? We certainly are, but I wanted to make sure we got everything lined up and ready to go before we move forward. So welcome to Page Break, and glad to have you with us. If this is your first time, if you've been with us for a long time and you're just coming back or just stumbling upon us in some way, shape, or form, welcome to the channel. And I'm delighted, as I mentioned a moment ago, to have author and literary consultant Amy Shannon joining us today. We're going to talk a little bit about her career as a writer, first of all, but also get into this question of literary consulting and literary consultants. And as a writer, might you need a literary consultant? Might you need someone like Amy to help you get your work out there, to help you get your work noticed by agents and publishers? So I'm delighted that she is here. She is an American storyteller, first and foremost. She lives in upstate New York, where she grew up. She shares her stories by basically putting pen to paper like we all do, the good old-fashioned way, but a lot of her stories focus on the individual strength of women. She's written over 120 stories, both full-length novels and short stories, as well as poetry, along with essays that really have a lot of innovative thoughts connected to that theme of the strength of women. She's also written under two pen names, one of those Alex Tempera, and also Royal Henry Blue. She's an editor, she's a book reviewer, she's a promoter and a literary consultant. She also has a podcast show, which we'll ask her about here in just a little while. It's called The After Show, which is a podcast program that she co-hosts with her co-host, Mackenzie Stewart. So Amy Shannon, welcome to Page Break. Thanks so much for taking time to take a page break with us today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. I'm so fascinated about this idea and concept of literary consulting and literary consultants, and we'll get into that in just a second. But I wanted to ask you first about your career as a writer. I imagine before you got into literary consulting, you were a writer first, and were kind of going through the same kind of writing, revision, editing, publishing process that a lot of writers go through. Can you talk about that, about why you got interested in writing? And my goodness, over 120 published works. You've been prolific for a long time. So how did all this come together for you?
Well, to be honest, from the moment I could talk, I would tell stories. My mom, when I was 4, my mom called me her little storyteller because I would either make up my own stories, or I would reinvent like fairy tales. Like the Three Bears was one I loved to make up my own version of the Three Bears. Once I learned how to write, then I was able to put, I did a lot of short stories. As a kid, I would just share like with my mom. My mom was a creative writer. She just did it as a hobby, and so she had stories that she could read to us. That I'm the oldest of five, so hers was like a never-ending story, and we'd be like, "Okay, Mom, when are you gonna write more?" So my mom was a big inspiration. Um, I wrote short stories in high school, excuse me, middle school. Um, I took all English classes, anything where I could write and also learn more about writing. Um, and a lot of it was poetry. But then in 2004, I was married at the time, and I lost my mother-in-law, and I had lost my mom um, when in 97. So she was like my second mom. And I knew there was like something missing. I was a full-time mom. I have four boys, and three of them lived with me and their father at the time. And I was working full time. So when everybody went to bed, I would sit down behind um, my computer. And this is 2004, so there's no Google. The they called everything www, the World Wide Web. Um, so I started writing what I thought was going to be a short story, and it ended up being a full-length novel. And that was my first book I wrote, Unwritten Life. And I sent out, I had like my friend read it, and she loved it, and she's like, "Oh, you should really try to publish it." And I didn't really think anything of it because I just liked to write. Um, and the thing, it would irritate me when people would say, "Oh, well, you need to make money from it." And at the time, I'm like, I mean, even now, I have a lot of work out there, and I'm not writing much because I have rheumatoid arthritis and a functional brain disorder caused by something my former husband did to me. But um, so I write a little bit at a time when I can. Um, but I just like, sure, I love it if I get like a $10 royalty check. I'm like, yay, somebody read my book. And that's how I look at it. Okay, so you get some sales or whatever, and it shows you that somebody actually picked up your book and they read it. And if they're nice enough, they'll give you a review. Um, and so I have a lot of books that I've written, but I kept going back to my first story. So um, that ended up, I started doing, it was going to be a trilogy, like the first book, and then a prequel, and then a second book. Um, well, and then I wrote other books, and then I kept coming back to that one. So when I ended it, um, there was several times as I'm writing, I was going to, okay, this is the last book of this. It was a series, and now it's a saga that I'm going to write. And then I would get more ideas. And then a few books later, I'm like, okay, this is it. This is the end. And then a couple of years ago, when I started having real problems writing, I'm like, I got to write one last story for this saga. So 67 volumes later, I wrote its finale. um, and I call it the MOD Life Epic Saga, and the MOD stands for three major last names of the characters. It's actually the stories revolve around one town that I made up. And if you looked on the map, it would be like in the middle of the Arizona desert. But I've never been to Arizona, but I did a lot of research. And I made up some of my own towns, but then I also, you know, I referenced like real landmarks and real cities, so people can kind of get if they're familiar with Arizona, then they would be like, oh yeah, this would be right here in the middle of the desert. Um, but I really loved my characters. I kept going back to them, and it's like, and I still go back and read, and I'm like, oh, I forgot that I wrote that part. And it's kind of like it's comforting to me to read my own words, and uh, I used to think it was silly. And so I would ask other authors, do you read your work? And I mean, like later on, when it's all done, do you go back and read it? Um, and I always started from the beginning. Every time I was going to write a new book, I would read from the beginning to wherever the last part left off. So that way my storylines were, it matched up with, and I didn't forget something, but I also kept a lot of notes on it. And it's one of my, it's like my favorite story that I ever wrote. And it's like the longest, if you put it all together, it's the longest one I ever wrote. I have a lot of other work that I write. Recently, I republished my book called Fractured Tears: A Struggle for Justice. I call it the 2022 expanded version. And um, I was a victim of domestic violence in 2005. Years later, I wrote Fractured Tears, and I did a fictionalized version of that story. Then I decided, um, because I was getting a lot of feedback from it, because I republished it, just kind of like, updated it a little bit and give it a little refresher. And I was getting great feedback. So I thought I would release this final book. And at the end, it tells my story, but in a way that of stuff that I went through, a timeline of things that happened from beginning to end, because I had to actually fight to get them to actually press charges against my husband and keep him in jail. So um, I did that. And recently they did, friends of mine did a book tour for me. And I got a lot of great feedback and some reviews for that. Um, but I wrote it mainly, not just to, you know, get it off my chest, but to help others that may be in that situation.
Very nice, very good. Yeah, and what a powerful way to communicate that experience and kind of that process and the healing that comes through writing and being able to do that through writing. So I want to shift and go and talk a little bit, move ahead just a bit, and talk about literary consulting. I feel like
Sure.
yeah, this is one of those terms and concepts that sort of jumps into and dives into the vernacular that we hear oftentimes about writing and publishing. I mean, we have terms like acquisitions editors and developmental editing and publishers and publicists and hybrid publishing and all these terms that experienced and inexperienced writers hear just tossed about all the time when writers are talking about writing. But this idea of literary consulting is one that I was not familiar with until we met, and we
Right.
talked a little bit about what you were doing and why you were doing it. So before we get into some of the specifics, if you had to define literary consulting or literary consultant, what is that exactly?
Well, it's a term that I came up with it. Well, at least I think I did, to describe what I was doing. I was trying to figure out what's the best way to describe, um, you know, like some kind of title, because people like people who have titles, you know. And I mean, yeah, I'm an editor and book reviewer. I do all types of editing for all types of documentation. But what I was finding, um, and then I'm like, okay, I got to find a way to help authors. That is like that's something that I want to keep doing until I can no longer do it. So if I either lose my mind or I die, I want to keep helping authors, especially um, authors who they don't know how to navigate the system. I had a client a few years ago, and well, maybe about a year or so ago, and I was doing editing for him, and then he's like, okay, what do I do now? And then he would ask me all these questions. He goes, do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? How do I publish this? A lot of questions. So um, and I have a lot of experience with the different processes of writing, from writing to like being published and then getting royalties or whatever. And I love, obviously I love to read. But I wanted to be able to help others, especially when they don't understand. Because, like you said, there's all these terms going around, and people aren't quite sure. What do I do next? Okay, I wrote my book. Now what? Um, so, what I like to do is I talk to the author, um, and I want to see what their needs are. Do they want to find a publisher? Do they want to find a new publisher? Sometimes that happens. Do they maybe they want an agent, maybe they don't, maybe they want a publicist. And through my connections, and I have growing connections, I have compiled a lot of information about publishers and agents, and I still continue to do research because there's always another one popping up. um, so I can help the author. um, they can say, okay, I need an editor, so okay, I'll edit your work. um, and then once it's edited and what I call published ready, it's ready to go. um, then they can decide how they want to publish it, or maybe they already know that they want um, to publish it with a traditional publisher, or they want to have an agent to help, because most traditional publishers want you to have an agent contact them, and other times they don't mind unsolicited manuscripts and submissions. So I do that research. I look to see, okay, what agents or what publishers would fit in what you want, and they accept your genre. That's really important. And the author kind of needs to know what their book is about. I will read the book, and I will help them if they want to write the book blurb, um, uh, a full, complete synopsis of the book, which is basically everything that it's about, broken down into less than 2 pages. And you give away the ending and all that, because some people want to read that. Some just want to take a few pieces of your manuscript and read that and decide from there. Um, and so I thought, well, I'm really good at research. I'm very organized. Um, I have, a growing network of people that I have contact with. I've been a book reviewer, a professional book reviewer since 2014. And that is like my passion, which I love very much. I love to read from especially new authors, authors that you may not have heard of before. Um, and I've had feedback where authors will get new readers because one of their readers read my review. So they'll like, oh yeah, they might have seen it on Twitter, or they might have seen it on Facebook, and they're like, oh, that book sounds good. Um, and they'll read it and write a review for the author. I do ask everybody reads if they write a review. It's really important, and there's a lot of reasons for it. But back with the literary consulting, it was like I was trying to think of, okay, I can do all this, but I don't want to be a publicist because I have too much work to do on that. I'm not going to be an agent. I can help someone self-publish because I've done it myself. I've used I've used KDP, I've used Lulu, when they had CreateSpace, but that's not there anymore. I use that for my own work, so I can help someone if they want to DIY but have Amy do it for them. I can do that for them as well. And I was trying to think of, yeah, I'm giving advice, I'm helping them do research and things like that. So it would be a consulting service, and I would be able to do things for them if they needed it, or recommend somebody who maybe something I don't do, but I can recommend somebody who does it. So, and I've offered like agents and publicists and publishers. Um, like I have a set of rules that I won't refer them unless they're at least 2 years old. They have a website, they have things that I can actually validate for them. Um, and, I have what I call a no-fly zone list of, publishers that I won't deal with, um, through word of mouth. I've heard, stories about certain ones, so they're not on my list. Um, Banned authors, I've had those. I usually only ban an author if they lie to me. So I've had that happen where they say they're having a release date, but they lie about when and it was like 2 years ago, but they just thought that, oh, she'll put it on her calendar and I can get to it real fast. Now I've kind of worked around that. So I can either, some authors don't mind the wait because I have a very long list, and others want it like done right away. So I give them options.
And that leads me to my next question, because somebody watching this might say, this is great. This is exactly what I need. Maybe I don't need all of the services that you were talking about, but maybe I need to just kind of do an a la carte approach and maybe take some editing with some research and maybe with some reviewing of the synopsis or helping me write the synopsis. Cost, that's going to be something that someone watching this is probably going to ask. Well, this all sounds great. This is what I need. But cost, how much does this cost? And so someone that is reaching out to you, and I know other literary consultants, everyone charges different fees, just like if you hire an independent editor to work on your book or your manuscript, everybody's going to charge a different fee. But, roughly speaking, how does your fee structure work for the different services that you provide, so that somebody watching wants to reach out to you or just in their mind get a ballpark idea of how much they need to budget for something like this for literary consulting? How do your fees
And
work? What do you charge?
well, for editing, there's three types of editing: content editing, just like the copy editing, which is proofreading, basically, depending on what their actual needs are, up to 50,000 words. Um, I charge $2 to $3. Well, it's an average of $2 to $3 per page, depending on the number of the word count. Um, and I have it not double spaced, but 1.2 spaces. So it's not a lot of pages. It's, it condenses it, but it makes it easier for me to read. And when I give that price to the author, I I ask them, before they're like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, okay, so what is your editing budget? What is your budget for this? What do you have that you can spend? And I will do like a sliding fee scale for authors, um, because sometimes they might find somebody really cheap, but they're not going to do the quality that I would do for them. And whether they pay me my full estimated price or they pay me what they can afford, they're getting the same service that anybody would. And I always ask that because I've had people say, oh, no, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I can't, I, in good conscience say, well, too bad. I can't do that. So I work with them on what they can do. If I do promotions for them, I have different ways of, it's kind of like, okay, I can do this promotion and like for social media. I have another blog. I have my Amy's Bookshelf Review blog. I also have my business website. It's called Essence Enterprises, and it's essenceenterprisesus.com. And that's where like all the information about my services are. And then my other website is amysbookshelfreviews.com. And that's where they can go see my reviews. They could sign up for newsletters. I do different promotions. I do featured of the month. Recently, I started Amy's picks of the month. So if they get a review, say they got a review in February, they can, I will pick 5 random books to be my pick and it runs in an email campaign. So people will know what the book is about, where they can find the author, where they can buy it on Amazon. And I started that this year. And if an author wants their book on the list, then they can pay $5. I mean, that's it, $5, and then their book is guaranteed to be on the list. So, and people really like that because I'm not putting my review on. I'm just telling people what their book is about, the book cover, where they buy it, where, the author's website, the link to wherever the author wants them to go to buy it, and what the book is about and its genre. So, like I said, there's some things is like, it's okay, it's $5, or they'll say, what can you do for me for this amount of money? And then I put together things and I'm like, this is what I can do for you. These promotions, I'll do this for you. I'll do that for you. And I worked with the author, and, and 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh, okay, that's great. Thank you. Whatever they need, I'll try to help. And I work with them because I know what it's like to try to do whatever you can for free, free promotion. But, sometimes you have to put money into it. But you don't need to spend thousands of dollars for an editor, or just to have me help, edit your work, promote your work, maybe write query letters for you. I do that as the literary consultant, and I do that in several ways. I can write it on behalf of the author and then send it through an email that I create specific to that author. And I give all the information to the author, or I can send a query letter. Like, my query letters are $20 a letter, or if there's a form to fill out, that's $20 as well. And
like a Google form,
the research,
like if you go to the agent's website and they have like a form on their website, or a Google form they want you to fill out, you'll do that also.
Yes.
Okay.
And I pretty much, since I've been doing this for a while, my first client that I was kind of like my guinea pig. And, when I really started, okay, this is what I'm going to do, write query letters, he actually got a book contract with a publisher, and then they agreed to pick up a book that he already published, but they're going to republish it for him. So that worked out for him. And he's like, when I'm ready for my other books, I'll let you know.
Right.
So yeah, I have a lot of people, they come back. And, I can't guarantee that I'm going to do an agent. I recommend sending up to 20 letters per agent, per publishers, not all at the same time, because you want to give us some grace period, maybe do 5 at a time. And if there's not, no response, or because sometimes it'll take a couple months to get a response. It really depends on who it is, but a lot of times I get confirmation that they receive it. So I always share and wait for approval from the person I'm working with. If I write a query letter, I write it as a baseline, and then I share it with them. And if they don't know what kind of hook to put for their book, a small line of what your story is about, and then there's a little bit more, like a 1 or 2 line description, and then the book description, also the author's biography and things like that. And I can write it on behalf of them, and I tell them who I am, or I can write it as if I'm them, or I can even write it and then give it to the author and they can send it. It's still $20 no matter what.
Fantastic.
And
so
the research, yeah, I try to. The research is a one-time fee of $100.
Okay.
No matter if I have to keep on finding more and more agents. So I keep a running tally and all that I have, and the genres. So I go to that list first, and then if I can't find what I'm looking for, then I have other means to do my research.
Excellent. Very good. So we're going to pause for just a minute and we're going to do what we do for all of our guests here on Page Break, and that's put you on the hot seat. We're going to ask you a few rapid fire questions to let our audience get to know more about you personally and more about you outside of your role as an author and a book reviewer and an editor and a literary consultant. So are you ready for the hot seat?
Oh, sure. Why not?
Okay, here we go. Couple easy ones just to get you started. Your favorite color?
Black.
Okay. Your favorite food?
Spaghetti.
Are you a dog person or a cat person?
I'm a turtle person, but I do have two cats. I have a turtle named Stanley, and well, when I named her, I didn't realize that she was male or she was female, but she responds to my voice, so I didn't change her name.
Very good. Very good. That's awesome. All right. So if you're going on a vacation, would you rather go to the beach or the mountains?
The mountains.
Okay. Who is an author that we should all be reading right now?
I'm going to promote my business partner, Mackenzie Stewart, because she has three wonderful books, and she knows that when I read them, I will be very honest with her. So um, I help her edit her work, and then I also do reviews. And that was something else I forgot to mention before, that and if I edit for you, if I do any other kind of promotion for you, and I haven't written a review, I will write a review for anyone that I work with.
Great.
So,
Terrific. Fantastic. That's excellent. So you live in New York and
yep.
you grew up in New York. So what is something that people who aren't from New York get wrong about New York?
A lot of people, when you say New York, where are you from? You say New York, they think that the whole state is New York City. They're under that impression. And so I'm like, upstate New York. I'm just outside of Saratoga Springs where the horse track is. But yeah, that's like the biggest misconception. You say New York, they automatically assume it's the city. It's like, no, we're a much more bigger state than New York City.
And I've heard other people from New York State that don't live in New York City say something similar. That we are not one and the same. We are not New York City. There is more to New York State than just New York City. Yeah, that's a very
Yes.
fair point. So my last question, and then we'll take you off the hot seat. So you've been involved as a writer. You've been involved in writing and editing and promoting and consulting for a long time. If you could change something about publishing or the industry or the apparatus that kind of controls how all of this works, what is something that you would change? If you could wave your wand and change something, what is something? It could be either a positive change or a negative change. What would you change?
I would change the way um, books are published, especially with, they used to call them vanity presses, or some still call them print on demand, and they have them. But um, some of those publishers and that charge, are like Hybrid or something, that charge authors to publish, and there's nothing wrong with charging authors to publish, but not all of them are discriminatory. So I mean, you could have a lousy book and get it published.
Mm-hmm.
So that um, is something that I would have, all publishers, no matter what, be discriminatory, even if you're using like a do-it-yourself type of thing. I mean, do it yourself, you can do it to sell your books, or they also allow, like, say you are creating a book that's just for your family and you want to print it, and you do it privately or whatever, and that's fine. But um, when people hear the word like self-published, and it's actually different than when you say indie author. Indie author sounds so much better than saying self-published, but it's basically the same thing. And but you can self-publish yourself, or and do it all yourself, or you can hire somebody to do that for you. But you know, some people shouldn't publish their books.
Yeah.
I've
Very,
read some.
yes.
I
Very,
don't,
yeah.
yeah, I don't give anything lower than 3 stars. But if somebody sends me a book and I start reading it and I can't get through it, and usually it's not the content, it's the typos or
Hmm.
the editing.
Hmm.
Um, I've had people send me their first draft. I go through at least 10 drafts before I even let anybody just look at it, um, to make sure that everything's all right. And I will send the author back their book, and I will explain to them, why I can't read and review it at this time. Um, and, if there's typos or whatever, let them know. And I tell them that if they ever get it edited and want to resubmit it to me, that would be perfectly fine. But I don't give less than 3 stars just because it's riddled with typos. It shouldn't be published if it's got that many typos in it. I
Yeah.
mean, even great authors, you'll find a typo or two that just gets missed, especially like transposed letters,
Hmm.
like form and from.
Right.
That's something I see a lot. That's something I do a lot. So I can see that. So
Yeah, very good and very well said. Well, thank you, Amy, for being on the hot seat. We're going to take you off the hot seat now. And thanks for playing along and giving us
no
some really
problem.
good insight and information about you. That was terrific. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about Mackenzie, who you mentioned a moment ago. Mackenzie Stewart is your business partner, and you all have a podcast called The After Show. So, tell us a little bit about that podcast, how it got started, and what kind of the format or the theme or the flavor of your podcast is for folks who want to check it out.
Okay. Well, we're on Blog Talk Radio, but it streams on most podcast streaming sites. So it's the After Show with Mackenzie Stewart and Amy Shannon. Um, Several years ago, well, we started the podcast in 2019, about about maybe a year or two before that. Um, I received a request for a book review from Mackenzie Stewart. She sent me an email and she said, I heard I had had a review freeze for a while, and because I was trying to catch up, because between 2018 and 2019 is when my reviews really started. I mean, I was listed in directories now, and so I was getting a lot of people, and I had to freeze it. Now, if that happens, I just do a waiting list. Um, and but she sent me a note and said, I was told by my previous publisher that you're open for reviews. Would you read my book? And I'm like, sure. And um, she's like, I also have an internet radio show called The Writer's Edge. She goes, I'd like for you to be on it. So we talked on the phone. We have never met in person, but she's like my best friend. We talked on the phone, and before I had even been on her show, she asked me if I would do a monthly recurring spot on her internet radio show. So once a month, I would be on her radio show and talk about books, reviews, or whatever I was doing at the time. And then we thought of, she's like, I want to do something different. And she goes, and I think that we could do it together. And it took a while for us to figure out what our concept was and the platform we wanted to do it. And, we had to test out different, like platforms to see what would best fit our needs and everything like that. So it was a lot of planning and a lot of, oh, we should do this. And we would have like a wish list, like very long. And then we were able to narrow it down, and we would have guests on and we talk. We have authors that come on the show. Um, we The guest appearance it's $30 per half hour, and it's only that until we can get to where we need to be to maybe get a sponsor or something like that. Um, but we look at it and we treat it. We're helping authors promote their work, um, and so that's what we we tried different things that we wanted to do, and we always look back at, we call our seasons chapters. There's 13 13 episodes in a chapter. We just started our 14th chapter. And, we always look back at what we've done, what worked, what didn't work, what we want to do. And somewhere along the line, we changed our focus, and it's to help authors promote their work, and also to give them information, talk about things. If we don't have a guest on, a topic that might just pop up, and we'll discuss it. And the other day we did one on women that inspired us through history, and we did a really good show, and we're looking to expand. And so that's a project that's coming up, and it's kind of a secret right now, but once we get going, everybody that cares will know about it. But our mission really is to help authors promote their work. I mean, what author doesn't like to talk about their book?
Right.
And all they have to do is they could pick up, well, I'm gonna say telephone because I'm old school, but I have a cell phone, but pick up their phone, they dial in a number, and they talk. And we ask questions, but we get into conversations, and we allow them to read an excerpt from their book, tell us about their book, what they did, what was their inspiration for that book. So it's to help promote, help authors promote the best they can, because sometimes they think that just doing a tweet or a Facebook post that says, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, is going to work. And eventually people are going to get real tired of seeing that and just like, okay, unfriend or unfollow. So there's other ways to market your work without cramming buy my book down someone's throat.
Very well said. And it's a terrific podcast, and I would encourage anyone watching our interview today to check it out. It is called The After Show with Mackenzie Stewart and Amy Shannon. So, Amy, in our final moments with you today, as we finish up taking a page break together, if anyone wants to get in contact with you to find out about your books and about what you've done as a writer, but more importantly, if they want to get in contact with you to talk to you about literary consulting services and more about what you do and how you can help, how can they find you? How can they get in contact with you? What's the best way for them to reach you?
I would say the best way to reach me is my email address. It's writer Amy Shannon. So it's WriterAmyShannon @gmail.com. And they could just write question or whatever they want. If it's literary consultant, put that in the subject line. Or, they can ask questions. One thing I do as when I'm reviewing someone's work, I also look at their websites, and I look at, sometimes they don't have an Amazon profile. So I you should really get that, especially if you have more than one book. And some they don't understand it. If I see something, I say something. So.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Our guest today on Page Break has been Amy Shannon. She's an American storyteller. She's got over 120 stories, both full-length novels and short stories, written and published. But more importantly, as she's moved into another chapter of her life and her career as a writer, she is doing literary consulting and being a literary consultant and providing literary consulting services for authors and writers at all stages of their career, from novice all the way to experienced. It's a terrific, terrific service and set of services that she provides. And if you need some help, folks, that's why she's here. That's why people like Amy are here, to help get you moving forward, to help get your project out there, to kind of help you get over sort of the proverbial hump that has got you sort of stymied a little bit with whatever project that you're working on. So I would encourage you to reach out to Amy at any time with questions. And again, if you've got questions as you're thinking of them, please leave those in the chat box below. If you're on Instagram, or leave it in the comments box on YouTube, and we will be sure to pass those questions and comments along. So, Amy Shannon, thanks so much for taking a page break with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And a reminder to subscribe to the channel wherever you may be watching. Got some really great content and some really good interviews and book profiles and bookstore visits and book fair visits coming up over the next few months that I know you're going to love. So be sure you stay in touch and in tune with everything that's going on the channel. Well, that's going to do it for us on Page Break. Please stay well, and see you someplace soon, I hope.